Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 26th, 2015 episode of Balls Deep Sports Talk. I am your host, Scotty Ball, and thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight is our 28th episode of the show, and like the prior 27, it is being brought to you as always on WNLMradio.com. Now, I would just like to take one quick moment to thank you, my weekly Balls Deep goers. We have, as I mentioned, this is now the 28th episode of the show. It's a weekly show. We started from as close to nothing as you can have with, 20 to 40 listeners. And now we are over 600 listeners strong here weekly and continuing to grow. So, hey, that's all we've ever wanted here at Balls Deep Sports Talk, is to continue to get bigger. I think, just about any man listening can understand and relate to that. But anyway, again, just wanted to thank all of you who are listening to the show every week here on WNLMradio.com, or perhaps you're tuning in now on the free, super awesome Spreaker app, Spreaker, also on the TuneIn app, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Balls Deep is everywhere. It is definitely my favorite part of Wednesdays in general, Wednesday day, Wednesday night. Well, especially now that Lucha Underground is not filming season 2. I think maybe when season 2 starts filming for Lucha Underground, that might be my favorite part of Wednesday nights, to be quite 100% honest. But hopefully one of your favorite parts of Wednesdays that you look forward to here is going balls deep with me, Scotty Ball, here on Balls Deep Sports Talk. Now, we got a lot of sports to cover and talk about or touch on briefly, and hopefully, at least tonight, that's the goal. That's not to say that it's going to be an extremely long show. It may be, it may not be. I have things to do still yet as summer is winding down. If you are a parent in Minnesota of school-aged children, as I am, it's very likely that your children start school next week, thus making this week the week of open houses for school and things like that. And I have a 7th grader and a 1st grader, so we will be attending those this evening, and that may affect the length, the total overall length of the show as far as minutes go. However, I will do my best to not let that affect in any way the subjects and amount of content that are brought up and discussed on the show. The length of detail into which I can go in each of those topics, that is obviously what would be sacrificed, but we'll do the best we can. So let's get into it, at least with the overview of some of the main things you can expect us to talk about here coming up on tonight's show. For all you football lovers, boy, if you've got the fever half as bad as I've got it, you've got a bad case of football fever, because I can't wait. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the regular season to begin, football season to officially be underway. Don't get me wrong, I am not one of those football fans who hates the preseason. I actually enjoy the preseason very much. A lot can be learned in the preseason, and a lot can be improved in the preseason. But so I like the preseason, but I'm ready for the real thing to be here. So we'll be talking about my Minnesota Vikings, as always, and where they're at, discussing Blair Walsh in particular, as well as the other relative Vikings situations. We will also be discussing the very unfortunate tragedy that befell one person for sure, and another who, is affected, certainly, at least at the moment, as well. in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Vikings, at the construction site of the new Minnesota Vikings Stadium. Some sad news to discuss in regards to that in the show. And as I mentioned earlier, it is NFL preseason. Of course, that means every week it seems like there is a new significant injury or two, or signing or two, or both, or something along those lines every week. So we will be discussing those as well. Also, for all of you fantasy football players and enthusiasts out there, as am I, if you know me, or if you listened last week, even if you don't know me, went into it last week. We went over basic draft tip or basic fantasy owner tips. There was actually a fantasy football training seminar type of thing at some big convention center or whatever in the Twin Cities this last weekend, I believe. It might have been 2 weekends ago, but I'm pretty sure it was this last weekend that people pay to go to. And, quote unquote fantasy football experts will, stand up there and give a speech for an hour or whatever. I don't know if they have a booth that you can come and ask them stuff. I don't know exactly how it works. I even know that people who know absolutely nothing about fantasy football whatsoever, like Common Man Dan Cole from K-Fan, go and speak at this thing. And again, people pay to go to this stuff. It's ridiculous. I can understand paying to get a magazine, a fantasy football magazine, that's got a list of all the players, letting you know what teams they play for now, and what's changed in the offensive schemes and bye weeks, and I totally get that. That's research. You're not necessarily just taking someone at their word for something. But yeah, people pay to go to this convention. Conventions like these all over the country. And so last week I freely, mind you, gave out some fundamental fantasy football owning tips. I will include a couple more tonight if I can think of any that I left out, which I believe I thought of a couple, one or two. Mainly in regards to my first fantasy football draft of the season, which occurred Monday night, I believe it was. More on that. So anyway, tonight I will be giving my second half, part 2 fantasy football preview guide, prep guide. Yeah, that's what we'll go with, prep guide, where you will actually get my player rankings or my thoughts on the different player rankings at the different positions. This is extremely valuable. That's right, I added an extra syllable in there, kind of. Valuable. How come no one says it valuable? I don't know. I might start saying it that way from now on, just to annoy people. Like Stewie on Family Guy with whipped cream. But anyway, it's extremely priceless information and insight and opinion going to be coming up from me at some point in the show regarding my fantasy football player rankings for this upcoming season, because it is fantasy football draft time right now. If you play fantasy football anytime from this week to the next week to the next week, that's likely when your draft is set to be. So now's the time to have your game plan, figure things out. But we will also be talking a little bit of college football, as well as the NCAA. College football season is right around the corner, so we'll be taking a look at some of the teams, just a little bit of who's expected to most likely be contending for the title in that stupid, I repeat, stupid 4-team college football playoff. Maybe I'll give you some thoughts on that as well. But I don't know. We'll see. That might be a long rant, so I'll have to check the time on that. But as far as college football goes, we will also try to discuss just a little bit of my Minnesota Gophers, even though I don't really follow them or care about them very much. Never have. Not that I cheer against them. I've never cheered against the Gophers. But I've just always been a pro sports team here in Minnesota. I believe the only time the Gophers have ever been able to have me as a fan was in the 90s as a college basketball fan, if you remember some of those great teams, particularly the Final Four team. I was definitely a Minnesota Gopher fan then as a child/young man. But so anyway, we'll be previewing the Gophers college football team just a tiny bit, at least based off of what I've heard thus far, and possibly a little bit of their schedule. Also in college football news, you will be getting my take on head coach of USC football, Mr. Sarkisian. He got himself into a dilly of a pickle over the weekend. And you'll get my take. You'll get that story and my take on that. Also, we got to discuss Major League Baseball, as it is the end of August, which means September is almost here. And, the final month of the baseball season. There is a great wild card race going on right now in the American League for the second and final wild card that we will get you caught up to speed on. And spoiler alert, the Twins are one of those 5 teams, as they are currently riding a 5-game win streak. But we'll go more into that a little bit later on in the show as well. But so we will be talking some Major League Baseball. We'll also take a brief look at the upcoming U.S. Open tennis tournament, which starts on August 31st, I believe. I'll double check that here sometime quick, but I believe that starts on the final day of August. And Serena Williams is definitely making this year's U.S. Open tennis tournament as must-see of an event in athletics, period. And, again, we'll give you a little more detail on that later on in the show. Also, a little bit of golf news where I can't believe it. I've been, it kind of contradicts it, but it kind of supports it at the same time. It's like both yin and yang. I don't know. It's really complex, but that's, this is balls deep sports talk. So, we're trying to challenge people mentally and spiritually and emotionally and just personally. But if you listen to the show regularly, you would know that I have, for months, weeks to months, been going on about how everybody just needs to stop talking about Tiger Woods. Well, this last weekend's tournament, which was the final of the golf regular season, the PGA season, Tiger Woods participated in it, and his play actually warrants me talking about it. So in that way, it's completely contradictory and hypocritical, and I was dead wrong. But the end result and the bottom line ultimately proves to the contrary, and proves me right somewhat on my initial take. But so we'll discuss that as well. So we got pro football, college football, pro baseball, tennis, golf. We'll take a brief glance at the NASCAR Cup standings. I know I have a few NASCAR fans who listen, so we will take a brief look at that. I did see a very intriguing, and I pray to be true, NBA trade rumor that you'll get a quick take on from me at some point in the show, and we'll just say that it involves my Minnesota Timberwolves, who I am and always have been a very big fan of. But it's been hard to be that for the whole Kevin Garnett Boston Celtic era. that was hard. We're still kind of rebuilding from that. But so anyway, you'll get my takes on that, as well as getting you up to speed on the WNBA standings